The sun descended toward the horizon. This happened each day. People in villages and towns observed this descent. They had observed it the day before. They would observe it the day after. As the light diminished, certain activities began. These activities were neither remarkable nor unexpected. They were the activities that occurred when daylight faded. People had performed these activities for many generations. The activities would continue for many generations more. In small villages, the day's work concluded. Field work ended when visibility decreased. This was a practical matter. One could not work effectively in darkness. Therefore, work stopped. People returned to their dwellings. They walked along paths they had walked many times before. The paths were familiar. The walk was unremarkable. Smoke rose from hearths. This smoke had risen throughout the day. It continued to rise in the evening. The hearth was the center of the dwelling. It provided warmth. It provided light. It provided a place to prepare food. These functions were constant. They did not change from one evening to the next. The preparation of the evening meal began. This preparation was simple. The food was modest. There was bread. The bread had been baked earlier, perhaps that day, perhaps the day before. There was pottage. Pottage was a thick soup or stew. It contained vegetables. It sometimes contained grains. Occasionally it contained small amounts of meat, though not always. The pottage had often been cooking for some time. It cooked slowly over the fire. The fire needed tending. Someone added wood to the fire. This was done carefully. Wood was a resource. It needed to last through the evening and through the night. Too much wood created unnecessary heat and waste. Too little wood meant the fire might die. The correct amount of wood was added. This judgment came from experience. People had been tending fires for as long as there had been people. Water was sometimes heated. The water came from a well or a stream. It had been carried to the dwelling earlier. Heating water took time. The fire warmed the pot gradually. There was no urgency. The water would be hot when it was needed. Until then, other tasks proceeded. People gathered near the hearth. They sat on simple benches or stools. Some sat on the floor. The floor was often packed earth, sometimes covered with rushes or straw. The seating arrangements were familiar. Each person had their customary place. This had been their place the evening before. It would be their place the evening after. Conversation occurred. The conversation was quiet. Topics were ordinary. Someone might mention the work completed that day. Another might mention the work planned for the next day. The weather might be discussed. The weather affected many things. It affected crops. It affected travel. It affected comfort. Observations about the weather were exchanged. These observations were neither profound nor trivial. They were simply observations. Children were present. Young children sat near their mothers. Older children might be given small tasks. A child might be told to watch the fire. Another might be told to keep the cat away from the cooking pot. These instructions were given calmly. They were followed or not followed in the usual way. If not followed, the instructions were repeated. This pattern was familiar to everyone. The meal was served when it was ready. Food was placed in wooden bowls or on wooden trenchers. A trencher was a thick piece of bread that served as a plate. The bread absorbed the liquid from the pottage. Later, the trencher would be eaten. This was practical. It meant less to clean. It meant less waste. Eating proceeded quietly. People used spoons made of wood or horn. They used their hands. Knives were sometimes present. The knife might be a personal possession carried by an individual. It might be shared among the household. Eating was not rushed. There was no reason to rush. The food was consumed at a steady pace. After eating, the bowls were set aside. They would be cleaned later, or the next day. Cleaning required water. Water required effort to obtain. Therefore, cleaning was done when it was practical to do so. This might be in the evening. This might be in the morning. The timing varied according to circumstance. The fire continued to burn. Its light filled the room. This light was not bright. It was a dim, flickering light. It created shadows. The shadows moved as the flames moved. This movement was constant and unchanging in its constancy. The shadows had moved this way the evening before. They would move this way the evening after. Some tasks could be performed by firelight. These were tasks that did not require bright illumination. A woman might spin thread using a simple spindle. The spindle turned. The thread grew longer. This was the result of the turning. The work was repetitive. The repetition was not monotonous. It was simply the nature of the work. The hands knew the movements. The movements did not require intense concentration. A man might work on a tool that needed repair. Perhaps a handle needed smoothing. Perhaps a blade needed sharpening. The work was done slowly. There was sufficient time. The tool would be ready when it was needed. If not ready tonight, then tomorrow night. The work would continue until it was complete. Older children might be taught simple tasks. A daughter might learn to card wool. A son might learn to splice rope. The teaching was done through demonstration and practice. Few words were needed. The teacher showed the motion. The student attempted the motion. Corrections were made as needed. This process continued. Learning occurred gradually, through many repetitions over many evenings. Candles were expensive. They were used sparingly. A household might have 1 or 2 candles. These might be made of tallow, which was rendered animal fat. Tallow candles produced a dim light. They also produced a smell. This smell was familiar. It was the smell of evening tasks performed by candlelight. Wealthier households might have beeswax candles. These burned more cleanly. They produced a better light. They smelled of honey rather than fat. But most households did not have beeswax candles. Most households had tallow candles, or no candles at all. The firelight was sufficient for most purposes. By candlelight, some people did clothes work. A woman might mend clothing. She threaded a needle. This required good light. The candle was brought close. The thread was passed through the eye of the needle. Sometimes this took several attempts. The attempts continued until the thread passed through. Then the mending proceeded. A tear was closed with small stitches. The stitches were even and regular. This was the result of practice. A man who could read might read by candlelight. Most men could not read. Most women could not read. But some could. A literate person might read from a prayer book. The reading was done quietly, perhaps aloud, but softly. The words were Latin words. The reader might understand them fully. The reader might understand them partially. The reader might simply know the sounds of the words without knowing their meaning. All of these were acceptable. The reading was an evening occupation, like any other evening occupation. In towns, the evening followed a similar pattern. The pattern was the same, though the setting differed. Town dwellings were closer together. They shared walls. A family in one dwelling could hear sounds from the neighbouring dwelling. This was ordinary. The sounds were expected sounds. Footsteps, voices, the scrape of furniture. These sounds formed the background of evening. Craftsmen completed their workday. A potter might clean his wheel. A weaver might step away from her loom. The wheel would be used again tomorrow. The loom would be used again tomorrow. Tonight they stood idle. This idleness was temporary and necessary. Even tools required rest from use. Apprentices received instruction in the evening. A master craftsman might explain some technique. The explanation was practical. It concerned the proper way to hold a tool. It concerned the proper sequence of steps. The apprentice listened. The apprentice would practice tomorrow. For now, listening was sufficient. Shops closed. Shutters were drawn across windows. The shutters were simple wooden panels. They fit into grooves or hung on hinges. When closed, they blocked the window opening. This provided security. It also kept out the night air. Night air was often considered unhealthy. Whether this was true or not true, the belief was common. Therefore, shutters were closed. Streets became quieter. During the day, streets held many people. There were merchants. There were customers. There were people passing through. In the evening, this activity diminished. People remained in their dwellings. The streets were not empty. Some people still moved about, but they moved about less frequently. They moved about with purpose, someone fetching water, someone visiting a neighbour. These movements were brief. Church bells rang. The bells rang at set times. These times marked the hours of prayer. Vespers was the evening prayer. The bells called the faithful to prayer. Some people went to the church. Most people remained in their dwellings. They said their prayers where they were. The prayers were simple prayers. They were prayers said many times before. The words were familiar. The rhythm was familiar. Animals settled for the night. Chickens had already roosted. They roosted when daylight faded. This was their nature. Pigs in their pens became quiet. Cows in their byres stood or lay in the straw. If a family kept animals close to the dwelling, the sounds of these animals could be heard. The sounds were soft sounds. Rustling. Breathing. These sounds were part of the evening. Dogs might bark occasionally. A dog barked if it heard something unfamiliar. Often it heard nothing unfamiliar. The barking stopped. The dog settled. Cats moved silently. They hunted mice in the darkness. This was useful. Mice consumed grain. Cats reduced the number of mice. Therefore, cats were tolerated, even valued, though they were not kept as companions in the way they would be in later centuries. Children became tired. Their play ceased. A young child might rest against a parent. An older child might sit quietly, staring into the fire. The staring was not purposeful. The flames held the attention simply by moving. The movement was hypnotic in its constancy. The child watched. The child's eyes grew heavy. Preparations for sleep began. These preparations were simple. There was little to prepare. Clothing was loosened, but often not removed. People slept in their undergarments, in their shirts and shifts. Removing all clothing would mean being cold. Keeping clothing on meant retaining warmth. sleeping places were arranged. In a small dwelling, the family might sleep together in one room. There might be a single bed, shared by parents. Children might sleep on straw mattresses on the floor. The mattresses were simple cloth sacks filled with straw. The straw was replaced when it became too compressed or too soiled. The mattresses were neither comfortable nor uncomfortable. They were simply where one slept. In larger households, there might be separate sleeping areas. A curtain might divide a room. A loft might provide additional space. The arrangements varied, but everywhere the principle was the same. Space was used efficiently. Warmth was conserved. People slept near each other for warmth as much as for any other reason. The fire was banked for the night. This meant covering the coals with ash. The ash would keep the coals alive but reduce the flame. In the morning, the fire could be revived by removing the ash and adding kindling. This was easier than starting a new fire. Starting a fire required striking sparks with flint and steel. It required patience. Banking the fire saved effort. A rushlight might be left burning. A rushlight was a reed soaked in fat. It burned slowly. It provided a small amount of light. This light was sufficient to navigate the room if someone needed to rise in the night. The rushlight would burn for some hours. Eventually it would consume itself. This was expected. Prayers were said before sleep. These were personal prayers, quiet prayers. Each person said the prayers they had been taught. A child might say a simple prayer. An adult might say a longer prayer. The prayers asked for protection through the night. They gave thanks for the day. They requested blessings for the day to come. The prayers were routine. This did not make them meaningless. Routine and meaning were not opposed to each other. People lay down. They arranged themselves in their sleeping places. Blankets were pulled up. The blankets were wool, usually. Wool held warmth even when damp. The blankets were heavy. Their weight was comforting. Outside, the village or town was dark. There was no street lighting. The darkness was complete except for moonlight or starlight. On a clear night, the stars were visible in great number. People did not often look at them for long. The stars were always there. Their presence was not remarkable. They would be there tomorrow night. Occasionally, a sound broke the silence. A dog barking in the distance, a door closing, a voice calling out briefly. These sounds were isolated. They did not disturb the general quiet. They were absorbed into the quiet. The night watch might pass through a town. The watchman walked established routes. He listened for unusual sounds. He looked for signs of fire, which was a constant danger. He carried a lantern. The lantern provided a small pool of light. Beyond that light was darkness. The watchman was accustomed to the darkness. He continued his rounds. In villages, there was often no night watch. People secured their doors. They trusted to their neighbours. They trusted to their dogs. They trusted to the general remoteness of their location. Most nights this trust was justified. Nothing happened. Sleep came gradually. Adults lay quietly. Their breathing slowed. Their thoughts became less distinct. The events of the day faded. The concerns of tomorrow had not yet formed. There was only the present moment. The present moment was dark and warm and still. Children fell asleep more quickly. One moment they were awake. The next moment they were not. The transition was swift. Their breathing became deep and regular. They did not move. Sleep held them completely. The fire burned lower. The light dimmed. The room grew darker. The shadows receded. Eventually, there was only the faintest glow from the banked coals. This glow provided no useful light, but it indicated that the fire still lived. In the morning, it could be awakened. Hours passed. The night deepened. In some dwellings, someone might wake briefly. They might listen to the sounds of the household, breathing, settling. The small noises that indicated all was well. Then they would sleep again. The night was long in winter. The night was shorter in summer. But the pattern was the same. Work ended when light ended. Rest came when darkness came. This had been true for a very long time. It would remain true for a long time to come. In monasteries, the pattern was different. Monks rose during the night for prayers. They prayed at matins. They prayed at lauds. These prayers occurred while others slept. The monks returned to sleep between prayers. Their sleep was interrupted, but this was their chosen way. It was not the way of most people. Most people slept through the night. Their sleep was not interrupted by clocks, for there were no clocks in most homes. Their sleep was not interrupted by obligations, for the night held no obligations. The night was for rest. Rest was taken. Some people slept soundly, others slept lightly. Some woke frequently. Some did not wake at all until dawn. These variations were individual. They were accepted. No one remarked upon them. Sleep was sleep. How it came or did not come was a private matter. Dreams occurred. People dreamed as people have always dreamed. Some dreams were remembered upon waking. Most dreams were forgotten. The content of the dreams varied. They might concern the day past. They might concern the day to come. They might concern nothing that could be identified. Dreams were not generally discussed. They were not considered significant unless they seemed to carry a message or warning. Most dreams seemed to carry no message. They were simply dreams. The night continued. The darkness persisted. In the darkness, the village or town was still. The stillness was broken only by small sounds. An animal shifting, a roof timber settling, the wind, if there was wind. These sounds were part of the night. They were expected. They were normal. Gradually, imperceptibly, the darkness began to thin. This occurred very slowly. It occurred in the hours before dawn. The change could not be seen while it was happening. But it was happening. The earth turned. The sun, though still below the horizon, began to send its first faint light into the sky. People still slept. They did not know that dawn was approaching. They would know when it arrived. For now, they slept. Their rest continued. The evening had long since ended. The night would soon end. But for this moment, there was only sleep and darkness and quiet. This was how people spent a quiet evening in the Middle Ages. The evening came, tasks were completed, food was eaten, the fire was tended, small work was done, preparations for sleep were made, sleep was taken, the pattern repeated. It had repeated the day before. It would repeat the day after. The pattern was neither interesting nor uninteresting. It simply was. It was the pattern of life. It required no commentary. It required no interpretation. It was people living as people lived. The evening came, and people met the evening in the ways they had learned. Then the evening ended, and night came, and people slept.